Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for joining us on Zoom, for those of you who chose to do so. I would have, but I felt like wearing pants today, so here I am. We're lucky to have Bob Nunez is the president of the local chapter of the NAACP, serving as our moderator today, and he's going to introduce the three mayoral candidates that are here and run us through the questions. Thank you, Bob.
You could be a high school teacher. Did you notice everybody was silenced down as soon as he got on there? I want to tell East Side and San Jose Unified that you're ready. So I'm not sure I really need, usually I do an introduction of all of you and let you state your own name. I'm gonna let you still state your own name, but all of you are on the city council for San Jose. So the introduction part is easy for me. But part of this is to get the mic level. But if you could just state your name, and then we're going to go right into the question. Okay.
Hello.
There you go.
Never. Good evening. My name is Raul Peralez, and pleased to be here with you tonight.
Hi, my name is Matt Mahan, and it's great to be here with you as well.
Good evening. I'm Councilwoman Deb Davis, and I am woke up with a sore throat this morning, got a negative at-home COVID test, but I'm going to stay masked for everyone's safety. So I just wanted to get that out there right away.
Thank you. And Cindy Chavez isn't going to be here tonight. She had her booster shot today. She wanted us to say that, and is not feeling all that great either. So she's staying. So the first questions are going to be 2 minutes. And Pat is the one you want to keep an eye on because he's going to flash the cards. So the first question, what actions would you take to ensure that we residents feel safe and secure in our homes, neighborhoods, and parks? And we'll start with you, Will.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first off, for those that aren't aware, I actually served as a San Jose police officer for 8 years, and I still serve as a reserve officer today. Out working patrol, volunteering 1 shift a month. So I get a firsthand glimpse and experience of the challenges that our community is facing, specifically around public safety. And I know firsthand how it was to be a proactive, adequately staffed police department pre-recession. And it was actually the downfall and the demise of our police department that drove me to run for office back in 2014. And it's been my goal since then to undo some of the challenges with the pension battles, and then to be able to rebuild our police department. So I would say, number one, that's what we need. We are inadequately staffed today. We need about 250 at least more officers to go out and patrol our community, but we also need them to be out on foot. We need to be able to engage with our community much more frequently, build rapport, have that community policing grow, and be able to ensure that our officers understand the communities that they are policing. I think there is so much benefit to come out of that. And I've been advocating that as we have been growing our police department. I've been advocating that we have permanent foot patrol, not only in the downtown. I've actually worked with my colleague, Deb Davis here, to expand that effort, ensure that we had that throughout our city. We've had that funded now on a one-time overtime basis, but that's inadequate. As we rebuild our police department, we need to roll that in permanently. I'm glad to say that in this year's budget, we're actually starting to do that. We're going to be adding in more officers, and specifically the mayor has now included that we have permanent foot patrol officers as well. He's asked for it to happen in downtown. I asked for that to be expanded citywide.
Thanks for the question. And I think that police staffing, community policing, proper oversight are all really important components. But I think we have to think of public safety as a system that includes the DA's office, the jails, the courts, and our behavioral health systems as well. And I think one of the real tragedies we're seeing today is that judges don't have an alternative between releasing someone who may be severely addicted and committing crime right back into the community versus putting them in jail where we also know they're probably not going to get the help that they need. And so we have to advocate for, and as mayor, I will push very hard to secure the funding, either through the county or if we have to go it alone as the city, to have a secure drug treatment facility so that individuals who are, say, addicted to meth, which is a real challenge on our streets right now and are committing property crime and kind of lower level quality of life crime in our neighborhoods and our commercial districts, can be sentenced into an inpatient treatment program where they will get the care that they need, but also not just be released right back into the community where there's very high risk. We also know many of the folks who are in our criminal justice system are being released, often pre-trial, and violating the terms of their release 50% of the time in our county. And there's a real lack of accountability there. And I'm not for just jailing people and throwing away the key, but we have to have accountability for crime and actually get people into the treatment programs that they need or have other conditions of release that they're held accountable to. So I think that's a critical component of this. It isn't just about police staffing, though that's important. We have to look at where the breakdowns are in the rest of the system. I'll close by saying, as a former public school teacher, I think it's also really important that we are investing in our young people. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure later when it comes to public safety, using our libraries, community centers, and investing in our youth so that they're prepared to be successful in our society and not be drawn to drugs and crime and other things that, thank you, I'm at the end of my time.
Public safety is the #1 priority in our city. And certainly as a council member over the last 5+ years, it's the #1 issue that residents bring up to me. As mayor, I will focus on bringing 250 more officers to our city and training that many over on my 2 terms. I think it's really important for us to pair our police officers who are out on patrol with mental health workers so that they can respond to 911 calls appropriately. A lot of the 911 calls are about mental health issues. We need mental health workers to help with that. We have a pilot program right now. We need that 24/7 staffing. I would also support the governor's care court proposal, which is to have judges really require treatment and housing for unhoused individuals who may not want it. I think that's going to be an important part of our public safety strategy. We've also had 23 deaths related to traffic incidents this year so far, and we're only in April. We are on pace to have a record-breaking year for traffic-related fatalities. We need more traffic enforcement officers. You may have seen my op-ed about that this past Sunday. We also need to add officers to foot patrol, as Councilmember Peralez discussed, especially in our business districts and in investigations. In addition to that, we need community service officers. We have some. We need them to be staffed 24/7 as well. They now do 50% of the reports that the police department writes. They are the ones who respond to what we call the lower priority calls, something where it's not a life or death issue. And I don't want to leave out the fire department. We installed life-saving devices on every fire engine during my term. Thank you.
Question number 2, Matt, you start. What do you think about SB 9 and 10 and the concept of opportunity housing in general?
Thanks for the question. I came out against SB 9 and actually did an early press conference opposing the idea that the answer to our housing crisis is to lift zoning and just kind of indiscriminately allow fourplexes all over the city. I do think that we have a housing supply issue. Regionally, we've added 6 jobs for every 1 home we've built. That's unsustainable. It is making our region unaffordable. But San Jose can't continue to house the entire workforce of Silicon Valley. The real challenge is cities like Cupertino think nothing of adding 10,000 jobs and building 0 housing. San Jose needs to do its part. Our general plan already shows where we can add 120,000 homes in downtown and North San Jose and near transit infrastructure. When we add people, we need to have the solutions for them to move around. We can't just put more cars on the road, more pollution in the air, displacement of low-income families as those homes get redeveloped. And so good solutions around this problem in San Jose are going to be smart growth solutions that build denser housing, near transit infrastructure, and more walkable communities like downtown San Jose, which is already currently one of the most depopulated downtowns in the country. We could put a big dent in our housing crisis by putting housing there. But ultimately, we need the state of California to create the right incentives for cities to be good actors on housing. One of our big challenges in providing services like police staffing to all of you is our small tax base, because we are already so residential heavy. So we need to have a smart growth plan that takes into account traffic, air pollution, fiscal impacts, and thinks holistically about what's good for our residents. I'm not saying we shouldn't build housing. I'm saying we should be smart about how and where we do it so it works for current residents and all the folks who move into that housing as we build it out. So I'm about to get the boot. Thank you.
SB 9 and 10, especially SB 9 and opportunity housing, really obliterates our general plan. It eliminates single family home zoning citywide, and it doesn't allow us to say where we want the growth to happen. The state does require us, I get asked this question sometimes, the state does require us to build new housing. We must do that. It's within the purview of the city, or should be within the purview of the city, to say where that housing should go, because we are the ones as a city that provide the infrastructure and the services to our residents. It's really important for us to keep to our general plan and build densely in the areas that we have already identified, urban villages. My colleague has already discussed that a little bit, but really it's near transit, but it's also dense housing that pays for itself. It pays for the infrastructure upgrades that are needed. When we split a single family lot and we have 4 homes where 1 home was, single family homes over time do not help us pay for the services that we all need and that we deserve. We have to have a balance of housing and jobs. One of the things that economic development does for our city is it provides tax revenue without the need for additional services that you and I all need. Our parks, our libraries, calling our 911 when we have a medical emergency or when something goes wrong. It's really important for us to ensure that we have a balance of economic growth and the housing that we're required to build by the state. And that's why it's important to support our general plan, and why when I was on the general plan task force, I was, along with Councilmember Pam Foley, that we were the first individuals to stand up and say opportunity housing is a bad idea for San Jose.
Thank you. If Supervisor Chavez was here as well, you would hear that she too is opposed to SB 9 opportunity housing. And so I'm proud and have been proud to be the only candidate to be in favor of SB 9 and opportunity housing as it made its way through our general plan task force. I grew up in what would be considered opportunity housing. I grew up in a rent-controlled fourplex in West San Jose, in a neighborhood that had mixed high-dense housing. It had single-family homes. And in fact, the fourplex that I grew up in, if you looked at it from the front, just looked like a 2-story house. That's how they were developed and built and made to fit in pretty well with the neighborhood there. If it wasn't for that affordable, stable housing, my family, very working class, would have been forced to move around the community, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to attend the same school district K through 12. And I can guarantee you I wouldn't be in the same position that I am today. It was that opportunity that that type of housing provided me that has given me an ability to go on and be a public servant, a school teacher, a police officer, and a council member now to serve our community and be able to give back. We are in a worse position today than we were back in 1982 when I was born, when it comes to the lack of affordable housing, when it comes to the lack of housing in general. And I will say that the SB 9 law is very, very modest, and it's not going to bring with it a windfall or the end of single family homes or single family zoning. I think that's been one of the challenges, is combating rhetoric that leads us to believe that that will be the case. That will not be the case. In fact, it'll probably be very, very modest conversions that we will see throughout our community. And it's not going to be the windfall of a solution either. This is a very small piece of the pie. I think it's a very reasonable piece to help us out of what is an extremely challenging crisis of a lack of housing and a lack of affordable housing. And we need to be able to use every single tool possible to create this opportunity of housing.
The next question is yours. We'll start with you. What would you do to resolve our homeless issue, and how long do you expect it to remain a concern?
That's a great question. Homelessness, unfortunately, is a problem that seems intractable and is a problem for every big city in America. And I've been in Salt Lake recently, which we had always heard had solved their homelessness problem. And I can tell you from eyes on the ground, that is not the case. I think it's going to be a problem for a long time to come. But as mayor, it's important for the mayor to take leadership, and I will do that as mayor, take leadership and get all of the actors together. We have many areas where there is not only homelessness, but also blight. We have to get all of the governmental agencies together and going in the same direction. It's also important, especially for the city and the county, to be coordinated. They're now doing that at a staff level. It needs to happen at all levels, including at the elected level, so that we're not duplicating efforts, number one. And number two, that even if we're providing housing first, which you may hear, even if we're providing housing, that we're also providing safety, sanitation, and services for all of those housing solutions. Now, some will talk about quick build apartments as if they are a panacea. These are modular units that are like dorms with bathrooms. Those we have provided over the last 2 years during the pandemic, 3 of those modular sites, and that has given us only 345 units. We have to have a mix of interim solutions like that may be cheaper in the short run, but in the long run won't last as long as permanent supportive housing. And wherever we have housing solutions, we have to have safety, sanitation, and services. It's very important for the community to be involved in these solutions so that we know that everybody not only is safe, but that these sites are helpful to the community and helpful to the neighborhood as opposed to being a detriment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I think we are going to be dealing with homelessness as an issue in our community for years to come. It is going to be impossible to hit actual zero. We may hit statistical zero at some point if we can actually house everybody that enters homelessness each year, but this is a reality of society. People are going to fall on tough times. There's going to be challenges that hit people and lead them into homelessness. What we need to do is be able to have adequate solutions for those individuals and be able to drill down on the problem itself. I do believe that this is the #1 crisis that we are dealing with. And I actually think that the success of the next mayor is really going to weigh heavily on how well they turn this crisis around over their term. And that's why I've made that my #1 priority, not only in the mayor's race, but really in dealing with it over the last 7 years as a council member representing the district that has the highest propensity of homelessness in our county. And I've had a lot of success in building these projects that will create solutions in addressing the root cause of it, but we need to expand those solutions citywide. So I think it's a 3-pronged approach. #1, I think we need to be able to create sanctioned encampments. We need the lowest level entry solution for individuals today that are suffering from homelessness. Today, what we do is we allow people to encamp wherever they want to land. And then in some cases now, we've actually identified those locations as places where we will provide extra resources, but we didn't choose the location. And in other places, we simply go out and abate them and merely to see them re-encamped. We need to give people an alternative location to go to. Secondarily, I think we need to work better together. I would create a homeless task force here to get all the stakeholders that are involved in this challenge, from the county, mental health services, public safety, the court system, be able to come in and bring those stakeholders together to work on solving this problem together. Lastly, we know the real solution is housing. We need adequate housing to be able to house everybody that's out there in our community. And we need to double, triple, quadruple down on our efforts to be able to create those solutions.
Frankly, I think we've heard a lot of this before, and I've been the one candidate in this race who's been willing to say that what we're doing is failing. We are halfway through our second 5-year plan to end homelessness. We've spent billions of dollars with a B. and we have more people on the streets today than when we started. Our current strategies aren't scaling. They simply aren't scaling to the level of the problem. New York City has as many homeless people per capita as we do, but 95% of their homeless population is sheltered. Over 80% of our homeless population is unsheltered. They took a shelter-first approach. I believe we should be identifying public land equitably distributed across the county, not just in San Jose, but land like perhaps the county fairgrounds where we have 150 acres of underutilized land, perhaps land out by the wastewater treatment facility where the city owns land. Other cities have to be part of the solution. We should be identifying publicly owned land, building prefabricated modular units at a fraction of the $850,000 per unit we are currently spending in our taxpayer dollars to build brand new apartments for homeless people, $850,000 a unit. And we need to get serious about addiction and mental health treatment. We know a huge portion of folks suffering on the streets are struggling with addiction and mental health. We need long-term inpatient care. Experts will tell you need 50 beds of inpatient care for every 100,000 people. We have just 13 in one of the wealthiest counties in the country. We have a fraction of the facilities and services necessary for solving this problem at the root cause for many of those who are struggling to get off the streets. And I'll just say at the end of the day, we have to stop thinking that we're protecting people's civil liberties by letting them live and die in a tent down by the creek. We have a responsibility for providing basic shelter and supportive services, and individuals have a responsibility for coming in from the outdoors and taking advantage of that shelter and services when it's provided.
So the next 3 questions, you get 1 minute. First one, and we're starting with Raul. How would you evaluate discretionary rezonings and special use permits for small infill sites which do not conform with the existing neighborhood zoning?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is one of the important roles that the council has that, in fact, a lot of people don't know about until it actually comes next door to them. But we deal with this on a regular basis at the city. And I have been, since I entered council, been reasonable to take a look at every single project individually. I don't think we need to look at this universally and say, I'm sorry, you don't meet the requirements of this location and that you can't be done. I take a look at each and every project individually and communicate with the community that is there to be able to see, can we actually construct something on these sites that is beneficial to everybody? And if we can, then in that case, I think you have an opportunity to actually change what is zoned there. If not, if we don't have that support from our local community, if this is not something that's going to be a benefit in general, then ultimately we have the opportunity as the council to stick with what is the plan and not approve a project like that.
Yeah, I think it really starts with community engagement and getting people involved early in the process and envisioning what they want out of development. And while I've generally wanted to protect our employment lands, because as I mentioned before, we have a surplus of residential versus job producing land, which really impacts our ability to generate revenue and provide services to you all. It is also the case that there are some sites that have been undeveloped for years on end. It's not in the best interest of the community. And if we can get housing there and it works for the community, that should be within our discretion. The general fund shouldn't be a straitjacket. It's guidance, it's planning, it's directionally where we want to go. But of course, the situation on any given parcel in any given neighborhood may require change. And that's really why you elect folks to use their discretion to figure out what works best for the community. And I've voted for some conversions. I've also been opposed to some conversions. So it just depends on the case by case basis.
When it comes to discretionary zoning, I'm always looking for a win-win solution. I think it's really important to involve the community, of course. But I also think it's important for us to preserve our lands that are for commercial uses. So when we're talking about zoning, especially when we're talking about zoning a commercial property, generally speaking, I don't want to just rezone it all the way to housing. I want it to be a mixed use so that at least the ground floor is preserving the square footage for commercial uses, if at all possible. Sometimes that doesn't work. So for example, I voted for against allowing or against requiring affordable housing to actually have that commercial because it doesn't work with the way that they fund their projects. But ultimately, we have to have the community involved, and we're looking for a win-win solution so that we can preserve our lands for employment, but also have housing. Thank you.
Matt, what would be your budget priorities for the 23-24 budget message?
Glad you asked that question. I actually just wrote a memo that my colleagues partially approved, which said that when we start the budget cycle, we should begin by setting 3 to 5 measurable goals and then program our budget around those goals so that you all know what we're trying to get done. You can see the measurement or the progress against it and see how much we've achieved at the end of that budget cycle. My top 3 priorities are ending street homelessness, improving public safety, and reducing blight in our city. And that comes straight from what I'm hearing at the doors as I'm going across the city, knocking on doors. Those are by far the top 3 things people care about. And they have an impact on so many other things. Families feeling safe in their community, small businesses being able to thrive, the city being able to attract investment in housing and jobs. But I want to see an accountable budget that starts with goals, measurable outcomes, programming the budget around it. And I believe our raises should be tied to how much progress we make against our goals at the end of every 12-month cycle.
First of all, our last raise was $42 a week. It's not that big, and I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for service. So I don't think that that's a great idea. But what I would focus on are much more tangible things. We need more officers. I already talked about that. I want to make sure that our new fire stations that we're building, thanks to all of you voting for Measure T, we are building new fire stations. We have to start putting away money to be able to staff those new fire stations. That's very important. The other things I would focus on in the budget are things that we can do for economic development, reducing our process for planning, reducing the time it takes to get tenant improvements for our small businesses, reducing the time it takes to get both housing and commercial development through the planning process. We probably need to put a little bit of money into the planning department to make that process go more smoothly. We also need to tackle blight, and we need to put more money into homelessness prevention because it's much cheaper to keep somebody housed than to get people housed after they've become homeless. Thank you.
The budgetary priorities of a mayor should be driven by the needs of the community. And today, what we're hearing, the priority needs are addressing homelessness, creating more housing opportunities, and creating better public safety within our community. I would say easily that would be my priorities coming into that budget cycle. But at the same time, nobody would have expected 2 years ago that our budget was going to be turned upside down by a pandemic. And so you're also going to respond to the needs of the community at the time. So I think it's great to plan, but at the same time, you have to be willing to be able to pivot. Today, I would say easily we need to be able to add more officers within the budget. I'm glad again that we are adding 15 today. We need to get again about 250 more to get to an adequate level. We need to be able to address the issues that we're dealing with homelessness at a much greater level. Again, starting that task force, funding sanctioned encampments to be able to do so. And we need to create more opportunities. We have an opportunity to help fund affordable housing development, spur affordable housing development, and we need to double down on it.
Yeah, the next one, we'll start with you. What is your position on the Reed-Hillview Airport?
Thank you. I am very concerned about the closing of the Reed-Hillview Airport because we don't have a plan for how we are going to deal with emergencies if the Reed-Hillview Airport closes. I think the Reed-Hillview Airport should stay open, and I'm very concerned about also the short-term impacts of where Civil Air Patrol is going to go, where the Eastridge Little League is going to play on a regular basis. I think that the study that the closure was based on was flawed, and we actually don't know if the correlation is related to causation. And even if it was, the airport has already gone to unleaded fuel to try to deal with the issue of lead. So I think that airport should stay open. It's been an asset to our community for many years.
Thank you. Well, first I'll say the airport is going to stay open at least for another couple of decades. This isn't something that's going to happen immediately on a closure. What I was concerned about was that report, which was actually a professionally done study, and it's the best evidence and facts that we have at the moment to be able to understand the impacts of this airport. I was extremely concerned at the levels of lead poisoning that we see in areas that are directly impacted by the flight path and where wind flow is going to our community. And we've seen that the high levels of lead in our community members here, especially our children, and we know the impacts of that, and we know the acceptable level, which is 0. So I was supportive of the county's efforts, and I am supportive of the path that the county is going down. I'm happy that it already spurred a stoppage of using leaded fuel here at Reed Hillview. That was a terrific opportunity and wouldn't have happened if this had not have passed. The next step is to engage our community, because there are some real impacts if we are to close down this airport. We need to ensure that if we go down that path, that we address those impacts and ensure the safety of our community at the same time.
Well, I guess I'm sitting in the middle for a reason. On the one hand, I think we really ought to recognize and be honest with the public about the many benefits of the airport as a reliever airport, as a site for emergency response staging, as a place for education and learning, the innovation that's going to be coming with vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. There's a lot to that airport that is a real asset to our community, and I think we should have that conversation. I also know we live in a democracy, and fundamentally, in the long run, public policy is driven by what the community will is. And so this has to be a decision of the community. If the community doesn't support the airport, it will need to be shut down. What I don't support is it becoming a politicized issue where we don't engage all of the stakeholders. We don't think through a transition plan and understand what investments have to be made at San Martin to transition all the traffic down there. What are the impacts on SJC? Where is San Jose State's aviation program going to go? We need to answer those questions before we just take a political stand to say, well, we're going to shut it down. And I don't think we've been sufficiently thoughtful or collaborative in the process.
Thank you. So we have time now, if you've been filling out the cards, for questions from the audience. Yes, I do. What to say, Pat? Okay. These are all 1 minute. And so, Raul, back to you to start. What steps can San Jose take to ensure effective police oversight?
Yeah, thank you for the question. 5 days after George Floyd was murdered, I issued the direction for the council to initiate the process which we're on today, which is reimagining policing here in the city. I know firsthand what works well and what doesn't, coming from being a police officer. And I've been proud to be in support of the police reforms that we've been looking at. And we're actually poised to now hear the recommendations from our community task force on how we can provide better policing to our entire community. And a big part of that is oversight. And I've been in favor as well of having better oversight. We had a tremendous model with our independent police auditor when it was first here several decades ago. Well, at this point now, it is out of date, and we need to be able to look at better ways to have oversight over our police officers. That way, our community can rest assured that we are doing the right thing and we are living up to what we offer to them.
So the question, I have supported the oversight, expanding the oversight powers of the independent police auditor. I think that public safety relies on public trust, and people need to know that if there are alleged abuses of power, that an independent body will provide oversight and investigation and have the power to do that effectively. Training needs to be an investment in high quality training that is proven to work. I also think it's little practices that were recently surfaced as we were doing research into better policing. For example, I think the public deserves to know who an officer is and why they've been pulled over, for example. And except for very rare circumstances, an officer ought to ID themselves and why they've stopped someone, just to kind of start the conversation. That's not always practical, but there are a lot of best practices we can adopt, ensuring that camera data is actually uploaded and accessible to the public. So I think we want a well-staffed, highly engaged police force that's also accountable to the community. And we need to continue to reform how we do policing to reach that goal.
Accountability is very important when it comes to policing, obviously. I also have supported expanding the powers of the independent police auditor. And I think we need to take a look at whether the internal affairs, the part of the police department needs to be as part of the independent police auditor as well. I think it's really important for us, for the community to have a voice. I think there should be a community advisory group to the independent police auditor, but I think it's important to retain the independent police auditor position because they're professional, they're lawyers, and they're able to take an unbiased look at what's happening at the police department. I also think it's important to continue what we have done, which is have independent studies on specific items like use of force by universities, outside groups, completely outside the city of San Jose, because they can provide a fresh perspective and best practices.
Matt, next one, we'll start with you. What is your position on allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections and why?
So I don't support allowing non-citizens to vote, but I did think that I think that we should have the conversation. I don't think we should be scared to have conversations about issues when hundreds of residents are expressing a concern or want to have that open conversation. And I trust in the process that we will get to the right conclusion. The reason I don't support it is that as I've gone around and talked to residents across the city, something that's become clear in every community in San Jose is that most people view voting as a fundamental right and responsibility associated with citizenship. It is something people have aspired to, have fought to earn, and they don't want to see that definition of citizenship change. And so I think the proper approach is to have our federal authorities, the federal Congress, create pathways to citizenship so that others can aspire to and work toward. And I understand there have been limitations there, but ultimately that's the right place to solve this problem.
I don't support allowing non-citizens to vote in our local elections. And I was the only council member to vote against moving it forward, to use staff time to study it. I don't think we need to waste time or money on this issue when it is a fundamental right and responsibility of citizenship. And frankly, a lot of immigrants have written into me and told me they were happy about my vote because they earned the right to vote through citizenship. And they feel that it is very important to be able to do that. I also think that we should be real about the fact that it is going to cost our city a lot of money to do that if we end up going down that road. First of all, we have to put it on the ballot. That costs at least $500,000 or more to put it on the ballot. And then if we actually have to enact it, it's going to cost the city money because the city clerk's powers will have to expand because the county registrar of voters currently does not allow non-citizens to vote in county elections. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, if Supervisor Chavez was here, you would hear that she is in agreement with my colleagues, and I'm proud once again to stand aside from them in being the only candidate in the race that has actually expressed support of expanding voting for non-citizens. And I will tell you that it's important to know that in the history of our country, this is nothing new. We have had the opportunity for non-citizens to vote throughout our history, and it's happening again throughout the country, happening today in New York City. And I would agree that we should mimic what New York City just approved this year, which is to allow legal permanent residents an opportunity to vote here. Legal permanent residents today are here legally, they're working, they're paying taxes, and they can even contribute to campaigns and candidates. But what they can't do is they can't vote for them. They can't vote for the individuals that they ultimately pay taxes to and pay their salaries. My father was a legal permanent resident in this country for nearly 40 years and fell into that category. I think it's a very reasonable growth and allowable for community members of ours to participate in our democratic process.
Thank you. So I'm going to select one more, but we have a number, two more. Okay. Those that I don't ask, we're going to send to you. I haven't asked Pat yet, and I'm not even going to look at him. To you in writing. And if you send them back to us, we can then post it on your website. Right, Pat? Oh, good. So this one is, and Deb, new housing requires additional water for showers, toilets, and dishwashers. If you support additional housing, what is your solution to the limited water supply?
Thank you for the question. As I said before, the state actually requires us to build more housing. So it's important for us to do that in the most efficient way possible. 50% of residential water use is spent on our outdoors. And so by having multifamily housing or denser housing, we actually save 50% of water use just by the fact that there are no yards or very little yard for apartment buildings and condos and that type of thing. So that's the kind of housing that I support. In terms of what we can do to help with the water supply, we're doing a lot already with our regional wastewater facility. We're trying to partner with Valley Water on more than just a pilot on water purification and using our wastewater and purifying it, not just once, but purifying it, putting it back into the groundwater, and then purifying it again to be part of our supply. And that's something that I think we need to continue to do.
Yeah, I would agree. We can't not build housing, not only because the state is requiring it, but because we know we need more housing. Because we need more housing here in our community. So we have to do that. But at the same time, absolutely, we have to recognize the impacts that that has, and specifically on things like natural resources. And water is something that here in California, we know all too well what the impacts of a drought can feel like. And although it's not in the immediate purview of the city, we have to be able to work better with our partners like Valley Water to be able to ensure that we have adequate water resources, whether it's our groundwater, whether it's being able to create innovative opportunities like recycled water. We need to continue to be an advocate for our community members in that regard to ensure that we are not depleting our resource of water, but rather we are working together to ensure that we can maintain that resource and at the same time build adequate housing.
Conservation, technology, and infrastructure. Over the last 3 decades, our county population doubled. Our water use actually has been flat because we cut per capita use in half by installing lower flow toilets and more efficient shower heads. The next frontier in conservation is encouraging folks to use native plants to re-landscape corporate campuses, more of our parkland, those who are willing to convert their front yard lawns into drought-tolerant plants. On the technology front, water recycling, purple pipe network, water purification, and eventually desalination is something that's going to have to be part of the conversation. Not today, it's far more expensive. It's not necessary today, but eventually we're going to have to invest in serious technology and infrastructure to secure our water future. Where we can't rely on the Delta and we can't pump more water out of the ground. We're already 11 feet lower than we were when we started doing that 150 years ago. So we're going to have to invest in technology and conservation. Thank you.
So one more. Raul, I think we're back to you. Right? Good. I lose track. I think it's the fact that I got a red card. That sort of means I better pay attention. Yeah, no, and I'm going to add just a little bit here. Let's see. Citizens need to feel that their voices are heard. The mayor and the majority of city council voted to construct build e-boards near San Jose Airport, despite over 95% of San Joseans and the Airport Commission opposed. Please talk about your vote and why you think it was a good idea or not a good idea based on your vote.
Yeah, thank you. Electronic billboards, that's what the question is referring to over at the airport. In the most recent action that the council took, there were 2, myself and Councilor Mahan, that voted against it. Different reasons, though. I voted against it because I did not feel that the process that we went down for approving this was fair, and I felt it was not beneficial to the city and that we could have a more fair process and something that would ultimately be more beneficial to the city. I did not fully agree with the opposition that we heard from our community on the impacts that these electronic billboards could have. I believe that there is an opportunity where we can strike a balance, where we can create new billboards, remove some of the blighted older billboards that we have throughout the city, be able to leverage the opportunity for for these new billboards to come in, as well as to utilize technology. I know one of the issues is blight and light pollution. We can create with the new billboards directional LED lighting that will eliminate that light pollution, and in fact, better than what we see today with the traditional billboards that have uplighting from the base of them. Thank you.
As Councilmember Peralez just said, I was the only council member who voted against electronic billboards on the merits because I met with hundreds of residents. I have a community working group in District 10 focused on blight. And I kept hearing over and over again, loudly and clearly, the people have the same concern I do, which is this slippery slope. If we start allowing more electronic billboards and rationalizing all the reasons why they're good, pretty soon we're going to lose that view shed. We're going to be driving along our freeways, and I think we're going to see a couple hundred of them out there. And I just felt that this was, the revenue potential isn't high enough. The blight potential is too great. I don't think the community trusts it. I think there are better ways to spur tourism and economic development and support small businesses and grow revenue. I don't think we need to go down this path. And I frankly just don't think the benefits outweigh the costs. And I think the wisdom of the crowd, the 95% of residents who say they don't support it, I think in this case, very much the wisdom of the crowd is right on. And so I was willing to make that lone vote opposing electronic billboards.
Thank you. I was the only one up here to vote for that, and I appreciate the chance to explain my vote. I think the issue of allowing, having advertising for the airport and revenue for the airport was actually not really as big a factor in as two other more important things for why I voted for it. First of all, we have required a 4-to-1 ratio in removing old billboards in neighborhoods to putting up a digital billboard along a freeway. There's no way we could have hundreds of electronic billboards when we require that ratio. And by the way, that's the only way that we can take down old billboards in neighborhoods because of private property rights issues. We can't require them to take them down without giving them something. So that's why I voted for the electronic billboards. Not only that, but we also get additional trees, 215 trees in those same neighborhoods that are blighted now and lacking in tree canopy. That's what we get for what we had to give up to allow electronic billboards. Thank you.
So now we get 1 minute closing statements, and we start with you, Nick.
Hey, well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm running because I'm concerned about the direction our city is heading in, particularly around encampments, trash, law enforcement, addiction and mental illness that's going untreated. And I really think we need to increase accountability for results. At the end of the day, what's missing in local government is not a talented workforce. It's not money. It's focus. It's setting clear goals. It's measuring the effectiveness of the dollars we're spending. And it's really holding ourselves accountable for delivering the results that you all are expecting. And as someone who's been a public school teacher in our community, also a business owner and a CEO, had to report to a board every 90 days. I know what it looks like to be accountable for delivering results on a focused set of strategic goals. And that's really the mindset I'm trying to bring to City Hall. So if you'd like to learn more, I hope you'll check out mahanforsanjose.com, and I'd love to continue the conversation offline. Thank you.
It's important for us to use our resources wisely. That includes not only our city dollars, your taxpayer dollars, but also our staff time. That's why I was the only council member to vote against both of the new gun owner mandates. I think it was a waste of staff time to come up with those ordinances, and they are of questionable constitutionality. We are spending a lot of time with our city attorney having to go through the court process to fight those, and they don't actually reduce gun violence. I think it's really important for us to rebuild the police department so that we have the opportunity for a safer city. It's important for us to regain single family home zoning so that we have the opportunity to have diversity in our neighborhoods. And it's also important for us to have joint efforts with the county to tackle homelessness so that we have the opportunity for a clean and thriving city. I would really appreciate your support for me. You can go online to devdavis.com to learn more. Thank you for coming this evening.
Yeah, thank you again. This is our first in-person forum, and so pleased to be here, and thank you for spending your time with us. I am a lifelong resident of San Jose. I've dedicated my entire career to serving you, our community, as a teacher, as an emergency medical technician, as a police officer, and now as a council member. I care deeply about my city, about our city. I'm now raising my 2 children, my 3.5-year-old son, Jorge, and our 6-week-old daughter, Sophia. And the issues that we are facing here in our community are very personal to me. I'm running to take on those challenges, addressing homelessness, addressing affordable housing, ensuring that we can increase public safety, and being able to ensure the growth and development that we allow in our city is sustainable and equitable. I'm running to ensure that we can take on these challenges and that the solutions we create will make San Jose a better San Jose for all of us. Thank you. If you're interested more in the campaign, please reach out, raulperalez.com, and I appreciate you again. Thanks.
So we want to thank the candidates for actually coming out to this facility today. We want to thank the pastor for opening up his church to us.